Yes, my name is Stratos Chikalas. Chikalas being a Parachukli. My grandfather made Chikalia. Our name is actually Mihalakakis. My father and uncle were born in Smyrni in Burnova. Burnova is just outside of Ephesus, if you look on the map and find it. During or after well, obviously during the catastrophe, he fled, ended up going to Kithera, where my auntie was later born. She was not born in Smyrni, so he had two siblings. Sorry, he had three siblings. He had his brother Aleko and his sister, I don't know what her name would be, but they called her Pizza, who died, who never came to Australia. My father then fled Kithera. At the age of about 17, he went to Port Said. In Port Said, he stole some papers or something and came to Australia and landed here in 1920 and went to Lismore. And in Lismore, in the year 2000, I have discovered, was made contact with my second cousins, who were also Chikalas, but of course Mihalakakis. They were Mihalakakis, but changed the name to Chikalas, and I did not know I had any relatives in Australia until the year 2000, the bicentenary, and I was made contact by an aeronautical engineer called Peter, and there is a doctor in Lismore who is a cardiologist, and he is also Mihalakakis. He's a Chikalas, and we spell our name with T-S-I. At the age of, I discovered and found all this out at the age of 19 when I first went to Greece on holidays. I was under the assumption my dad came from Kithera, because on his paperwork and from the papers from the archives in Australia I got in 2000, they just write down that he was born in Athens, Greece. The only thing I ever knew, I had no idea he had even relatives here, but apparently he had a relative in Wollongong. But then I read this article in a Post magazine about his cousin, Spiros, who was a squadron leader in the Air Force. And he said he was related to him, and I didn't believe that until year 2000, when I was made contact with by Spiros's siblings, the aeronautical engineer and the cardiologist in Lismore. So I had no idea. He never ever spoke of the catastrophe, ever. And I never heard any of this until I started travelling in 1972. He was very young when he came to Australia. He still had an accent. He never went to school. He was uneducated. He's practically illiterate. And my auntie never, because she wasn't born there. No. She was born in Kithera. Right. My uncle did. He told me a little bit about it. He told me, it was through my uncle Aleko that I found out that they were born in Burnova. And he showed me a map of Smyrni and said, this is where we come from. And I looked on the map, I've seen the town, and it's outside of Ephesus. Not far in. On the map it appears it could be 10 kilometres, 20 kilometres, you know. But yeah, never ever spoke of it, and I was under the assumption, well, I was under the assumption, given the name Mihalakakis, Bianakis, that we're of Cretan descent, and that he came from Kithera. I thought they're Kitherians, because everyone in Charleville was like Commonos, Locusts, and they're all Kitherians. The Coronis, they're all Kitherians. And but my dad did know a lot of the Kitherians because he went to Potamo. So he knew all the Commonos and the Coronis and all them. He came out, because like Harry Coronis came out in 1800 and something. He had an MBE from the Queen. I don't know if you know Harry Coroni's story.
Yes, that's right.
Papa Coroni's. And yeah, so it was interesting for me to find out that he was actually from Smyrni. I've been to Turkey, but I've not been there, and I want to go there.
Right.
I've not been to Turkey yet, just go to Ephesus and see the ruins, but more importantly, I'd like to go to Burnova. But I haven't made it yet. But I was in Greece a few years ago. I went over, because see, I've inherited Mum's house in Kefalonia. Yeah, so with my cousins, because all my cousins, I've got 3 girl cousins, and there's my mother's brother, and so we have this house in Catalonia. And through some, I don't really know what's happened with all the property. My auntie, I think, was losing it. She's probably passed away now, but apparently I'm still entitled to some land in Kithera. But then my uncle said, no, we're not, because we sold it and whatever, and you know what happened, people poached it and that, and so, you know, I've sort of given up on Kithera, like, and it doesn't bother me very much. I went over to Portamor, and it is in Portamor that I went to the Marhia and got the Epistipico Inicio there from the book, which amazed me, you know. They got the big book. I said, what's your name? And I said, Mihalakakis. They went bang. They opened the book, and I was surprised how they were so organised. But all
That's
they had
amazing.
in the book, it was amazing. But the amazing thing was, they didn't know what to write there. They just wrote that he came from Smyrna, and that's all that was written in the book. Nothing else. Nothing about dates. They didn't have any. They had no records when they fled. So they went straight to Kithera, and they recorded as just, you know, this year. And that's all. So when the archives sends the papers, I can show you all the papers from the archives, the Australian archives, about my dad, and the autopsy report, everything. It says that he came from Athens, Greece. So how did they immigrate those days? This is what intrigues me. How did they come here? What did they say to the authorities when they landed here? Here I know that my dad's from Smyrna. The Australian paperwork says he's, you know, Athens, Greece, you know. So there must be a lot of Greeks in Kithera that are of, you know, descendants from Smyrna, not just my dad's family. Although it is quite extensive, there are still Mihalakakis in Kithera. There is a Babis Mihalakakis there, so his, you know, parents must be from Smyrna, because they can't be locals, can they?
No.
So they must be from Smyrna. They must have came there between 1914 onwards, because in 1920 my father came to Australia. So you work out the catastrophe of 1914, 1922. So he mustn't have spent very much time there, or no. He must have, imagine how young to go from a catastrophe to start travelling, to go from one end of the world to the other at that age. Upon arriving in Brisbane to get married, my mother had to leave from Athens. Could you imagine? From Brisbane to Charleville. Charleville at that time was a thriving town, because Australia was on the sheep's back. It was a very, very rich town. At one time there were 50 Greeks in town. There could have been 50 to 100 Greeks. Now there is only 1 Greek, and that is my mother and my brother. Sorry, 2. They have all gone. The Cominos, the Locuses, the Coronis, all of which were from Kithera, where my father went after Smyrna. And that's about the end of the line for him, because my father never left Charleville after landing in Sydney, from Sydney, Lismore, Charleville, and that was the end of the thing. But and that's about all I found out about, you know. I'm not, like, other than the fact we've made contact with my dad's cousin siblings in Lismore. Other than that, I don't know of any other relatives in the world that I have, other than being on Facebook now, and I've discovered there's a lot of Chicalathas around. I've spoken to some of them on Facebook, and they say, well, they're not even Kitherian. During the war, my father was very well respected because he fed all the ex-servicemen. He had a cafe there. He started off with the cafe, and when the returned servicemen came back, he fed them all, and he got like a life membership in the RSL because of what he'd done. He then went from a cafe, and he was the first person out west or in Australia to import a brick-making machine from Germany, and he started manufacturing concrete blocks in the 50s. His visions were unbelievable, but he was in the wrong place. So he built houses in Charleville that were double brick and rendered. that people are doing now. He was doing this in the 50s, and his houses are still there, rendered and stuccoed, double brick. And had he had gone to Brisbane, Sydney, anywhere, he would have been a multi-millionaire, but he for some reason got stuck out in the West. But that was an amazing sight he had, that he, you know, had this force to make double brick houses, render them in the 50s. And now every house is rendered. He was ahead of his time in that way by importing this machine. There are buildings in Charleville that are still double brick, made from concrete bricks from my father, and the business was called the Olympus Brickworks, and I still have letterheads of it and that. And yeah, it no longer exists because we've built houses on that on the factory. The factory was in the middle of a suburban area, and it was allowed to be there because it was established in the 1950s.
Σ' αγαπώ γιατί είσαι ωραία. Σ' αγαπώ γιατί είσαι ωραία, σ' αγαπώ γιατί είσαι εσύ. Κι αγαπώ κι όλο τον κόσμο, κι αγαπώ κι όλο τον κόσμο, γιατί ζεις κι εσύ μαζί.
τραγούδι ο πατέρας μου. Και είναι τη Μικρά Ασία, το τραγούδι ο πατέρας μου.
Μπράβο.